The sound of sirens still echoes in my ears as I gaze out the plane window. The city of Paris stretches out below, a tapestry of golden lights promising adventures I've waited 72 years to experience. My hands tremble, not with fear, but with an emotion I thought I'd lost forever. The first-class ticket I've hidden for 3 months is finally taking me away from them, away from the humiliation, away from the attempts to turn me into a ghost in my own home. David never imagined I'd be capable of this, none of them did. But here I am, flying over the Atlantic Ocean, carrying not just a suitcase, but $58,000 worth of dreams that were nearly stolen from me. What they don't know is that this trip isn't just about Paris. It's about a promise made 50 years ago, a secret kept in my heart, and a revenge as sweet as the French champagne I'm about to taste. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. My name is Richard Coleman, and today I discovered that my own son considers me a dead man. The living room of my Dayton home was bathed in golden October light when David knocked on my door. I should have known, by the way. He glanced at the papers scattered on the coffee table, travel brochures, maps of Europe, that train ticket for the Orient Express I'd printed 3 times, just to make sure it was real. His eyes narrowed the way they did when he was a child, and discovered mischief. "Dad, we need to talk." His voice held that tone I knew all too well, the forced authority of a 42-year-old man who still thought he could order me around. Margaret always said that David inherited my stubbornness, but lost my compassion along the way. In that moment, looking at the son I'd raised with so much love, I finally understood what she meant. There was something cold in his blue eyes, something calculating that made me instinctively recoil. "About what, son?" I pretended not to know, but my heart was already racing. "About this crazy trip to Europe." He gestured to the papers as if they were evidence of a crime. "Laura told me you've been researching flights, expensive hotels in Paris, even a Mediterranean cruise." Laura, my sweet, smiling daughter-in-law, who always made a point of checking my computer when she came to visit, who asked about my financial health in that honeyed voice, while her eyes calculated every penny of the inheritance Margaret left me. "So what if I'm researching?" My voice came out more defensive than I intended. "Can't a man dream?" "Dreaming is one thing, Dad. Throwing money away is quite another." David sat in the armchair that used to be Margaret's, and this intrusion irritated me deeply. "You're 72 years old. Your blood pressure is high. You can barely carry groceries by yourself, and now you want to cross the ocean like a 20-year-old. Each word was a stab. I'd just gotten back from the doctor the week before, a routine checkup that showed I was in excellent shape for my age. My blood pressure had been under control for 3 years. And the shopping thing, well, that was just me being too lazy to carry bags when I could ask for help. "You don't understand, David. This has always been my dream. Your mother knew it. We planned to take this trip together when we retired, but then her illness came and..." My voice trailed off. Margaret had died 2 years ago, but the pain was still fresh as an open wound. "Exactly. Mom isn't here anymore. You're alone. What if something happens? What if you have a heart attack in the middle of Paris? What if you get lost? You don't even speak French." The impatience in his voice made me feel like a child being scolded, as if 60 years of hard work, sacrifices and responsibilities meant nothing, as if I were a senile old man who couldn't even tie his own shoes. "I can manage just fine on my own, thank you. And as for the money..." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "It's my money, David. The inheritance your mother left me, $58,000 that I've saved religiously to make this dream come true." His eyes widened, not with worry, with greed. I saw the exact moment he calculated how much of that money could be his in the future, how much of his mother's inheritance was about to be wasted on an adventure he considered pointless. $58,000? He stood, pacing back and forth like a lawyer presenting a case. "Dad, do you realize that this money could be used to improve your life here? It could be used to hire a nurse, renovate the house, or even be saved for medical emergencies. Medical emergencies? I laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. You want me to prepare to die instead of live. I want you to be realistic. The mask finally slipped, and I saw my son's true face. You're 72 years old. This isn't the time for romantic fantasies about traveling the world. It's time to accept your limitations and act like a responsible adult. Limitations. The word echoed through the room like a gunshot. In an instant, all the dreams I'd nurtured, all the nights I'd spent awake planning itineraries, all the promises I'd made to Margaret on her deathbed, all of it was reduced to one cruel word: limitations. You know what, David? My voice was calmer now, dangerously calm. Maybe you're right about some things. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe I'm irresponsible. Maybe I should just accept my limitations. He smiled, thinking he had won. Poor fool. I'm glad you're being sensible, Dad. You'll see it's better this way. What David didn't know was that I had already purchased the ticket 3 weeks earlier. The ticket was hidden inside my favorite copy of Hemingway's Paris is a Party, an irony only I understood. Direct flight to Charles de Gaulle, first class. Departure in 2 weeks. Peter was already waiting for me. Of course, son, you're right. Absolutely right. I walked to the window, looking out at the garden Margaret loved so much. The maple leaves were golden, falling softly like golden tears. It was October, the perfect time to be in Paris. To walk the streets Hemingway walked, to smell fresh croissants and strong coffee, to finally fulfill the promise I made 50 years ago. Then it's settled, David said, sweeping the brochures off the table like trash. You'll forget about this Europa thing, and we'll find more sensible ways to use this money. More sensible. For whom, I wondered. For him and Laura, certainly. For the grandchildren who rarely visited me. For everyone but me. But I smiled and nodded, letting him believe he'd won, because sometimes the best revenge is letting people completely underestimate you. And David was about to discover that underestimating Richard Coleman was the biggest mistake of his life. Betrayal has a specific smell. It's like sour milk mixed with guilt. 3 days after our talk, I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the key turning in the front door lock. David had a spare key for emergencies, but lately he'd been using it as if he owned the house. Dad, where are you? His voice echoed down the hallway, followed by the click of high heels on the hardwood floor. Laura was with him. Of course she was. In the kitchen, I shouted, feigning joy that I didn't feel. They appeared in the kitchen doorway, like 2 vultures circling a carcass. Laura, with her perfectly applied fake smile, and David, with that expression of someone doing someone a huge favor. Both were carrying folders and papers, never a good sign. Hi, Daddy Coleman. Laura leaned in to kiss me on the cheek, but I could feel the tension in her muscles. How are you feeling? Well, thanks. Do you want coffee? Actually, David pulled out a chair and sat down uninvited. We came here to discuss your financial future. Laura had some excellent ideas. My financial future, not ours, not a family conversation. My future, decided by them. Anger began to boil in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. What kind of ideas? Laura opened one of the folders with a dramatic flourish. Well, David told me about your sensible decision to cancel your travel plans, and we thought it would be a perfect opportunity to reorganize your finances more strategically. Strategic. Another code word for let's steal your money legally. See, Dad? David spread papers out on the kitchen table like a corporate negotiator. Laura works in financial planning. She can help you invest this money so it will yield much more in the long run. And, Laura added with that smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, we can also set up a joint account, for your safety, of course, in case an emergency happens and you can't access your funds. A joint account. With them. For my safety. I sat down slowly, pretending to consider the proposal while my mind raced. They had planned all of this. The talk about the trip was just the first step. Now they were coming for the money directly. "That's very generous of you," he finally said. "But I need time to think." Laura's smile faltered for a split second. Of course. But Papa Coleman, in my professional experience, people your age sometimes make impulsive decisions, especially when they're dealing with the loss of a spouse. So that was it. I was having a midlife crisis at 72. My dreams of traveling were just the delusions of a lonely widower who didn't know what to do with his money. Laura's right, Dad. You've been through a lot of stress these past 2 years. First caring for Mom, then grieving. There's no shame in admitting that you need help making important decisions. Important decisions. As if choosing how to spend my own money were a decision I couldn't make alone. And there's another thing, David hesitated, exchanging a look with Laura. We're worried about you living alone in this big house. Laura researched some really nice senior housing in the area. The world stopped. Nursing homes. They wanted to admit me. They're wonderful places, Laura hurried to explain. With activities, 24-hour medical care, other people your age, you wouldn't be lonely anymore. And the house, David continued, could be sold. The money from the sale, along with your savings, would ensure that you have a comfortable and secure future. Comfortable and safe. In other words, controlled and isolated. Have you guys looked into the price of the house? I asked, with a calmness I didn't feel. Well, Laura opened another folder. Anecdotally, yes. The real estate market is very good. A house like yours in this neighborhood would easily be worth between $320,000 and $350,000. $350,000. Added to Margaret's $58,000 inheritance, that would be over $400,000. Enough money to ensure David and Laura would have a very comfortable future when I died, which, conveniently, would be much more likely to happen quickly in a nursing home than by traveling around Europe. It's a lot to process, I said, getting up from the table. I need time. Of course, Dad, but don't take too long to decide. The sooner you move to a suitable place, the better it will be for everyone. For everyone. Especially for them. After they left, I was left alone in the kitchen, staring at the papers scattered across the table. Colorful brochures for Golden Age residences and Villa Sunset luxury senior care. Investment contracts that would give me secure returns while they controlled the principal, forms for transferring legal authority in case of incapacity. They had planned everything, every move, every argument, every document. The only thing they didn't know was that I was already 3 steps ahead of them. I walked to my room and grabbed the Hemingway book from the bedside table. The plane ticket was still there, untouched, like a secret whispering promises of freedom. 12 days. Only 12 days left. Peter had emailed me the week before. "Richard, mon ami, Paris is beautiful in October. The cafes are full, the leaves are golden, and I found the perfect little hotel near the Latin Quarter. You're still coming, aren't you? 50 years is a long time to wait for a friend. 50 years. David didn't even know Peter existed. Neither of them knew about the promise we made when we were young and stupid and thought the whole world belonged to us. When we swore that no matter what, we would meet in Paris when we were old. Margaret knew. She always knew. She was the one who encouraged me to stay in touch with Peter all these years, who smiled when I told stories about our younger days, who said in the hospital 3 days before she died, "When I'm gone, will you promise to find Peter? Will you promise to live all the dreams we put off because of me?" I had promised, and a promise made to a dying woman is sacred. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Emily, my 18-year-old granddaughter. "Grandpa, can I come over? I need to talk to you about something." "Of course, dear, always." Emily was the only one in the family who still looked at me as if I were a real human being, not just a problem to be solved. Maybe she was the only one who would understand. Or maybe she was the only one I could still trust completely, because in 12 days, when I was flying across the Atlantic to Paris, the truth would finally come out. And David would discover that underestimating his own father was the biggest mistake of his life. Emily arrived an hour later, and for the first time in weeks, my house felt alive again. At 18, she had the tireless energy of youth, but also a maturity that constantly surprised me. Long brown hair like her mother's, bright blue eyes like mine, and that fierce determination I recognized from my younger self. "Grandpa, I need to tell you something," she said, throwing herself into the living room chair with the awkward grace typical of adolescence. "Mommy and Daddy are plotting against you." I feigned surprise, though my heart was pounding. "What do you mean, dear?" "Last night they thought I was asleep, but I heard them talking in the bedroom. Dad was talking about how you're losing your mind, and that you need to be protected from your own decisions." She made air quotes, imitating her father's voice with cruel precision. Mom was agreeing, saying it's for your own good. My clever granddaughter. She had discovered for herself what I already knew. "And there's more." Emily leaned forward, lowering her voice as if we were conspiring. "They mentioned something about your $58,000. Dad said it's being wasted and that they can invest it better for you." "Emily, are you sure about what you heard?" "Absolutely. Grandpa, they want to control your money. Plus, Mom was researching nursing homes on the computer. I saw her browser history. The confirmation hit me like a punch in the gut, even though I already knew. It was one thing to suspect, another to be absolutely certain of the betrayal. You can't let them do this." Emily stood up, pacing back and forth just like her father did when he was agitated. The irony wasn't lost on her. "You're still young. You still have so much to live for. Emily, honey, they're my children. They think they know what's best for me." "Nonsense." She stopped in front of me, hands on her hips. "You raised my father to be independent, to follow his dreams. I remember you telling me how you encouraged him to go to college, how you paid for his education, how you always told him he could be anything he wanted. And now he wants to deny you the same thing." She was right. The hypocrisy of the situation was glaring. I had sacrificed so much to give David every opportunity possible. I worked 2 jobs to pay for his college education, sold my classic car, a beloved 1967 Mustang, to help with the down payment on his first home. Margaret and I postponed our own retirement to ensure he and Laura could settle down comfortably. And now he wanted to rob me of the only chance I had left to realize my own dreams. "Grandpa, do you remember the stories you used to tell me about traveling, about Paris, about the cafes, about the Louvre?" Emily's eyes lit up. "You always spoke with such passion. And about your friend, what was his name?" My heart stopped. "Peter." "That's it. Peter. You said that one day you two would meet again in Paris. What happened to that dream?" I looked at my granddaughter. This extraordinary young woman who knew me better than my own son. And I made a decision that would change everything. "Emily, can I trust you?" "Completely." "You know I do, Grandpa." I walked to my room and returned with the Hemingway book. With hands that trembled only slightly, I removed the plane ticket from between the pages. Emily's eyes widened. "Grandpa, is that a plane ticket to Paris, first class, departure in 11 days?" My voice was firm now, resolute. "Peter is waiting for me. We made a promise 50 years ago, Emily. A promise I intend to keep." She took the ticket reverently, as if it were a sacred relic. "Have you bought it yet? Are you really going?" "I will. And no one, not your father, not your mother, not all the money in the world, is going to stop me." Emily screamed with joy and hugged me so tightly I nearly lost my balance. "I knew it. I knew you wouldn't give up. You still have fire in your eyes, Grandpa. You still have life to live. But Emily, this has to stay between us, at least for now." "Of course, it will be our secret." She paused, thoughtful. "But Grandpa, what if they find out? What if they try to stop you from traveling?" Leave it to me. I have a plan. In fact, I had several plans. I had transferred $40,000 to an account at another bank, an account David and Laura didn't know existed. I had made a new will, without telling anyone, leaving very specific instructions on how my inheritance should be divided, with some unpleasant surprises for those who tried to control me. And I had written a letter that would only be read if something happened to me. Emily, can I ask you a favor? Anything, Grandpa. If anything happens to me, if I get sick, or if your parents try to commit me somewhere against my will, I want you to contact my lawyer. His name is Robert Chen, and his number is in my address book. Do you promise? She nodded solemnly. I promise, but nothing will happen. You'll go to Paris, you'll meet Peter, and you'll have the most incredible adventure of your life. That afternoon, Emily helped me do something I hadn't dared to do on my own. I started packing some things for the trip. Not much, just the essentials for 2 weeks in Europe. Clothes appropriate for the October weather in Paris, my medications, the watch Margaret gave me for our 20th wedding anniversary, and a photo of us taken in 1975, when we still dreamed of traveling together. Grandpa, are you nervous? I stopped folding the shirts and considered the question. No, honey. For the first time in 2 years, I feel alive. It was true. Since Margaret's death, I had felt like I was merely existing, not living. Going through purposeless routines, passing the days without expectation. But now, with the trip approaching, I felt an energy I hadn't experienced in decades. And you're not afraid of traveling alone? Emily, I fought in the Vietnam War. I worked 35 years in a steel mill. I raised a son, cared for a sick wife, and survived more losses and challenges than your father could ever imagine. You think I'm afraid to get on a plane to Paris? She smiled, and in that smile I saw a little bit of myself. The same determination, the same fire, the same refusal to accept limitations imposed by others. When are you going to tell Mom and Dad? Right on time, darling, right on time. What Emily didn't know was that I had chosen exactly when and how I would reveal my trip. It would be during Sunday dinner, 5 days from now. David and Laura always came over for Sunday dinner, a family tradition they maintained more out of obligation than pleasure. But this Sunday would be different. This Sunday would be the day Richard Coleman would remind his family that he was still alive, still in control, and still capable of making his own decisions. And their reaction would just be the beginning of my sweet revenge. Sunday arrived with a light rain that made everything grey, but my heart had never been so light. I spent the morning preparing a special dinner, roast beef with roasted potatoes, braised green beans, and the apple pie Margaret often made for special occasions. If it was going to be my last meal in this house with the family, at least it would be memorable. David and Laura arrived promptly at 6, as always. David carried a briefcase. Apparently, he couldn't go anywhere without documents to get me to sign. Laura brought flowers, a gesture that would have been sweet if I hadn't known it was calculated to put me in a good mood before trying to manipulate me. The house smells wonderful, Dad, David said, hanging his coat in the hall closet. What are we celebrating? Oh, you'll find out, I replied with a smile that made Laura frown. Emily arrived 15 minutes later, and our eyes met for a split second. She gave a small wave, our agreed-upon signal. Everything was ready. During dinner, we kept the conversation light. David talked about work, Laura complained about the prices of things, Emily talked about her college preparations. I listened patiently, knowing that soon the entire dynamic would change completely. Dad? David cleared his throat after finishing his second slice of pie. Actually, there's a special reason we're here today. I brought some documents for you to review. Here we go. Laura has completed her research on investment options for her savings, and we've also found some truly exceptional homes that we'd love for you to visit next week. Laura nodded enthusiastically. There's a particularly beautiful one, Papa Coleman. It's called Golden Sunset Manor. It has a lake view, daily activities, and a 24-hour nurse. You could make new friends, play card games. Card games. As if my life could be reduced to card games and vanilla pudding served at 4 in the afternoon. That's very generous of you, he said calmly. But it turns out I have other plans. David paused with his fork in the air. What kind of plans? I got up from the table and walked to the dining room sideboard where I'd left the envelope. The envelope that contained not only my plane ticket, but also copies of all the documents proving I was in full control of my mental and financial faculties. Well, I walked back to the table and placed the envelope in front of them. Actually, I'm going to Europe. The trip leaves in 6 days. The silence that followed was deafening. David went pale. Laura dropped her fork. Only Emily smiled, trying to hide her satisfaction. Dad, we've already talked about this, David said slowly, as if speaking to a child. You yourself agreed it was an irresponsible idea. Actually, I never agreed. I just let you believe I had. I opened the envelope and pulled out the plane ticket. This is my first-class ticket to Paris. Direct flight, leaving next Friday at 2 p.m. Laura gasped. Daddy Coleman, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. And there's more. I pulled another document from the envelope. This is a medical certificate from Dr. Harrison, dated last week, confirming that I am in perfect physical and mental health to travel. Normal blood pressure, excellent reflexes, perfect cognitive ability. David took the document with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the lines, searching for something, anything he could use against me. And this, I continued, taking out a third paper, is a statement from my bank confirming that I have sufficient funds for the journey and that all transactions have been made by me personally, being in full control of my faculties. David was turning red. Dad, this is crazy. You hid this from us. You lied. I didn't lie, David. I just didn't tell the truth. There's a difference. My voice was calm, but there was steel in it. And you know why I didn't, because you two spent months trying to convince me that I was incapable of making my own decisions. We're trying to protect you, Laura snapped. You're 72 years old. What if something happens? What if you get lost? What if you have an accident? What if? I sat back down, looking directly at them. You know the difference between you and me? I've lived a lifetime of facing what-ifs. You live a lifetime of trying to avoid them. Emily couldn't help but smile a little with pride. Besides, I continued, I'm not going alone. I'm meeting an old friend in Paris, Peter Matthews. We met during the war, kept in touch all these years, and made a promise to meet in Paris when we were old. Peter Matthews? David frowned. I've never heard you mention that name. There are many things about me you don't know, son. Many stories I've never told, many dreams I've kept to myself. I looked at Margaret's photo on the wall. Your mother knew about Peter. She always knew. She was the one who made me promise in the hospital that I would make this trip. The mention of Margaret created a moment of respectful silence. Even David didn't dare question his mother's final wishes. But Dad, David tried one last time, even if you go, you don't have to spend $58,000. You could travel more economically, stay in cheaper hotels. David! My voice cut through the air like a blade. I've worked 45 years of my life, 45 years waking up at 5 in the morning, coming home at 7 at night, grease-stained and bone-tired. I paid for your education, helped with your household, cared for your mother during 5 years of illness. $58,000 is what's left of my dreams, and I'll spend every penny however I choose. The impact of my words was palpable. David recoiled as if he'd been slapped. And there's one more thing, he said, pulling the last document from the envelope. This is a power of attorney I signed this week, giving temporary legal authority to Robert Chen, my attorney, should any of you try to prevent me from traveling or question my mental capacity. Laura was livid. Are you threatening us? I'm not threatening anyone. I'm protecting myself, because it's been made very clear to me that you don't trust my judgment." Emily finally spoke. "I think it's amazing, Grandpa. You should have done this a long time ago." "Emily!" David turned to his daughter. "Did you know that?" "I knew, and I completely support it." Emily stood up, coming to stand beside me. "Grandpa deserves to live his dreams. He's not a child who needs our permission. He's my father, and I care about him." "No," Emily replied with a firmness that made me proud. "You care about his money. There's a difference." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. David and Laura exchanged glances, and I knew they were furiously considering how to resolve the situation. "Dad," David finally said, trying to sound reasonable, "even if you go, at least let us arrange some arrangements. More robust travel insurance, a companion." "No. A phone with GPS at least, so we can—" "No. Dad, you're being stubborn." "I'm being free, David. There's a difference." I got up from the table and began clearing the dishes. Dinner was over, and with it, the illusion that we were a united family. "The decision is made. I'm leaving on Friday. I'll be gone for 2 weeks. Emily has my hotel number in Paris and instructions for real emergencies, and I emphasize the word real." David and Laura left 20 minutes later, carrying their briefcase of unsigned documents and their thwarted plans. Before leaving, David turned to me one last time. "Father, if you do this, if you really leave against our advice, don't expect us to be here to clean up the mess when you get back." "David," I replied calmly, "if you can't support my happiness, at least have the decency not to try to destroy it." After they left, Emily and I were left alone in the kitchen washing dishes in silent companionship. "Grandfather?" "Yes, my dear. Do you think they'll try to stop you somehow?" I stopped drying the plate in my hands. It was a question I'd considered many times in the past few weeks. Maybe they will. But Emily, there are times in life when you have to choose between security and freedom, between what others expect of you and what you need for your own soul. I looked out the kitchen window where the neighborhood lights were starting to come on. I chose freedom. On Tuesday, 3 days before the flight, I discovered that David and Laura were not going to give up easily. I was in the backyard watering Margaret's plants when I saw the unfamiliar car pull up to my driveway. A black sedan with tinted windows, the kind that screamed official even without identification. My stomach dropped. 2 men in suits got out of the car. One older with grey hair and a serious expression. The other younger, carrying a leather briefcase. They walked up the driveway with the confidence of those with legal authority. "Mr. Richard Coleman?" The older man spoke. "Try. I'm Investigator James Morrison with the County Department of Social Services. This is Dr. Patrick Wells, a psychiatrist. We've received a report that you may be experiencing cognitive difficulties that prevent you from making sound financial decisions." Then my worst suspicion was confirmed. David had reported me to the authorities. "Who made this complaint?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "This is confidential, sir, but we have a legal duty to investigate situations where older adults may be at risk of financial exploitation or making decisions that jeopardize their safety." Financial exploitation. I was being exploited by myself, apparently. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your concern, but I can assure you that I am in perfect mental health. I even have recent medical documentation to prove it." Dr. Wells stepped forward. "Mr. Coleman, we understand that you recently purchased an expensive ticket to Europe and are planning to travel alone. In our experience, sudden behavioral changes in older people can indicate the onset of dementia or other cognitive problems. Sudden changes in behavior, as if deciding to live my life were a symptom of mental illness. Doctor, this trip is not a sudden change in behavior. It's a dream I've had for 50 years. The fact that I'm finally making it happen isn't madness. It's determination." "Even so," Morrison said, "we need to make an assessment. It's standard protocol." I had two options: cooperate and prove my sanity, or refuse and look exactly like someone with mental problems trying to hide their condition. David had set me up for a perfect trap. Very well, make your assessment. The next hour was one of the most humiliating of my life. Dr. Wells quizzed me about the date, the current president, recent events. He asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. He made me repeat lists of words, draw a clock, explain proverbs. I answered everything correctly, but I felt my dignity being shredded with each question. As if 72 years of responsible living could be reduced to a multiple-choice test. And about your finances, Mr. Coleman. Can you explain to me why you're spending such a significant amount on this trip? Because it's my money and my life, and because I promised my dying wife that I would make this dream come true. But $58,000. Doesn't that seem excessive? Doctor, have you ever lost a woman you loved for 45 years? Have you ever spent 2 years caring for someone as they slowly withered away? Have you ever made a promise to someone who was dying? Dr. Wells hesitated. No, sir. Then you are not qualified to judge how I choose to spend my money or live my remaining time. Morrison took notes throughout the conversation. At the end, they retreated for a private discussion in the garden. I watched them from the kitchen window, trying to read their expressions. 20 minutes later, they returned. Mr. Coleman, Dr. Wells said, sounding almost disappointed, although your decision to travel may seem impulsive to some, we found no evidence of cognitive impairment. Your responses were consistent, your memory is intact, and your judgment skills appear normal. However, Morrison added, we strongly recommend that you consider less risky alternatives. Perhaps domestic travel, or at least escorted travel. Gentlemen, I appreciate your concern, but my decision is made. After they left, I sat in the living room shaking with rage. David had crossed a line I never imagined he would. He had tried to use the government to declare me incompetent. The phone rang. It was Emily. Grandpa, I just found out. Dad told Mom he called social services. I can't believe he did that. Emily, where are you? At their house. Dad just got home and he's furious because the assessment didn't go as he'd hoped. Can you hear what he's saying? Hold on a second. I heard Emily moving, probably approaching where David was. He's on the phone with someone. He's saying, oh my God, Grandpa, he's talking to a lawyer, something about judicial restraint and mental incapacity. My blood ran cold. Court-ordered injunction. David was trying to declare me legally incompetent. Emily, are you sure? Absolutely. He's asking how long the process takes and if it can be done before Friday. David wasn't just trying to stop me from traveling. He was trying to completely take away my control over my own life. Emily, I need you to do something for me. Very important. Anything, Grandpa. Call Robert Chen, my lawyer. His number is in my address book. Tell him everything you heard. Everything. He'll know what to do. I'll call right now. After hanging up, I stared at the wall where Margaret and I's wedding photo hung. We were so young, so full of dreams. She looked beautiful in the simple white dress we'd bought on sale. I looked awkward in my brother's borrowed suit. Margaret, I whispered to the photo, your son is trying to make me a prisoner in my own life, but I promised you, and I will keep it no matter what the cost. That night, Robert Chen called me back. Richard, Emily told me about the situation. I have good news and bad news. Start with the bad ones. David has indeed filed for an interdict. He claims you are suffering from senile dementia and pose a danger to yourself and your finances. And the good news? The process takes at least 2 weeks to be analyzed, and with the psychiatric evaluation you underwent today being negative, there is no legal basis for an emergency order. So, can I travel? You can travel. But Richard, I have to warn you, when you return, you will face a legal battle. David is determined. Then so be it. At least I'll have 2 weeks of freedom before the war starts. There's one more thing. Emily mentioned that David and Laura were talking about getting their finances under control. Do you want me to take some preventative measures? What kind of measures? We can transfer your funds to accounts they can't access. We can also formally document your current mental capacity for use in future litigation. Do whatever is necessary, Robert, but do it quickly. I leave in 3 days. After hanging up, I went to my room and finished packing. Every piece of clothing he folded was an act of rebellion. Every item I packed was a declaration of war against those who tried to control me. David thought he could break me by using the law, medicine, and my own family against me. But he had underestimated one fundamental thing. A man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous of all. And Richard Coleman was about to prove he still had a lot of fight left in him. Thursday arrived with a storm that perfectly mirrored the turmoil in my family. It was my last full day in the United States, and I should have been anxious about the trip. Instead, I spent the morning in Robert Chen's office, signing documents that would protect my financial and legal freedom while I was away. "Richard," Robert said, adjusting his glasses as he organized the papers, "we've transferred 90% of your funds to accounts in 2 different banks. David and Laura can't touch them without a specific court order, which will take weeks to obtain." "And at home?" "Transferred to a trust you control. Even if they could declare you temporarily incompetent, they couldn't sell it." I signed the last document and leaned back in my chair. "Robert, do you think I'm crazy for doing this?" He smiled, a sad but understanding smile. "Richard, my wife died 5 years ago. Cancer, like Margaret. Every day I regret the trips we didn't take, the dreams we postponed, thinking we'd have time later." He leaned forward. "You're not crazy. You're living." When I got home at 2 in the afternoon, I found David and Laura waiting on the porch. This time they weren't alone. There was a man in uniform with them, a sheriff's officer. My heart raced, but I kept my expression calm as I got out of the car. "Dad," David stepped forward, "this is Officer Martinez. He's here for a welfare check." A wellness check, another bureaucratic trick to intimidate me. "Coleman," Martinez said respectfully, "we have received a report that you may be being coerced or manipulated into making financial decisions against your will. I need to ask you a few questions." Coerced. The irony was almost funny. The only coercion I was experiencing came from the very person who had filed the complaint. "Officer, may I ask who filed this report?" "Your son, sir. He's worried someone might be taking advantage of you." I looked directly at David. "Officer Martinez, my son is correct. Someone is trying to take advantage of me, but it's not who he thinks." David turned pale. "Mr. Coleman, can you explain to me about this trip you are planning?" "Of course. I'm traveling to Paris tomorrow to meet an old friend and fulfill a promise I made to my wife before she died. It's a trip I've planned carefully, with adequate funds, full medical insurance, and medical documentation attesting to my fitness." "And no one is pressuring you to take this trip?" "Absolutely no one. In fact, certain people are trying to pressure me not to do it." Martinez looked from me to David, clearly sensing the dynamics of the situation. "Coleman, you appear to be in full control of your faculties. You have recent medical documentation. I see no evidence of coercion or exploitation." He turned to David. "Sir, your father has the legal right to make his own decisions, as long as he is mentally capable, and he clearly is." David opened his mouth to protest, but Martinez held up his hand. "Unless they have concrete evidence of a crime or mental incapacity, and a negative psychiatric evaluation proves otherwise, there is nothing we can do." After Martinez left, David and Laura stood on the porch like 2 defeated generals, surveying a lost battlefield. "Father," David tried one last time, his voice thick with frustration and something that almost sounded like desperation, "why are you doing this to us?" "With me, David." My patience finally wore thin. "You reported me to social services. You tried to have me declared legally incompetent. You called the police to my house, and you ask why I'm doing something to you. We're trying to protect you. You're trying to control me. There's a huge difference. Laura finally spoke, her voice shaking with anger. If you do this, if you really leave, don't expect us to be here when you get back. We won't clean up the mess you make. Laura, I replied calmly, the only mess here is what you've made of our family relationships. They left without saying goodbye, and I was left alone on the porch, listening to the echo of decades of family history being shattered. Margaret always said that love wasn't possessive, that loving someone meant wanting their happiness, even when we didn't understand their choices. David had forgotten this lesson, or perhaps he had never learned it. Emily arrived an hour later carrying a small bag. Grandpa, I brought you some gifts for your trip. She opened the bag and took out a leather notebook. For you to write about your adventures. Emily, it's beautiful, thank you. And this, she handed me a small portable charger. For your phone, so you can send me pictures of Paris. I'm not very good with technology, dear. You'll learn. And Grandpa, she hesitated. I brought something else. Emily took a sealed envelope out of the bag. What is that? A letter. From Grandma Margaret. My world stopped. What? I found it in her room after she died. It was addressed to you with instructions to give it to you only when you were traveling to Paris. Mum never knew I took it. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Margaret's delicate handwriting filled my vision. My dear Richard, if you're reading this, it means you finally found the courage to make our dream come true. I'm so proud of you. I know it wasn't easy. I know David tried to stop you. He was always overprotective, just like you when he was little. But my love, you deserve this adventure. You deserve to see Paris, to walk the streets we always dreamed of exploring together. Find Peter, tell him our stories, drink French wine and eat warm croissants, visit the Louvre, sit in a cafe and watch the people go by. Live, Richard. Live for both of us. And when you come back, remember, family isn't the one who tries to control you. Family is the one who loves you enough to let you fly. I love you forever, Margaret. Tears streamed down my face as I held the letter. Margaret had known. She had foreseen everything. David's resistance, my hesitation, my eventual determination. She always knew you would, Emily said softly. Even when she was sick, she talked about how you would go to Paris one day. That night, I tidied up the final details of my trip, my passport, tickets, hotel reservations, European currency. But the most important item was tucked neatly into the inside pocket of my jacket. Margaret's letter. Tomorrow, I would be on the plane. Tomorrow, I would begin the journey I had waited my whole life to take, and David, Laura, social services, and everyone else who tried to stop me would discover that Richard Coleman still had plenty of fire in his heart. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's simply about proving them completely wrong about you. Friday, 5:30 in the morning. The day of freedom had arrived. I woke before my alarm, my body vibrating with an energy I hadn't felt in years. Outside, the world was still dark, but inside my chest was a light that burned like a beacon. I showered slowly, savoring every moment. I put on my best dress shirt. The light blue one Margaret always said matched my eyes. Comfortable linen pants for the long flight, leather shoes I'd bought especially for walking the cobblestone streets of Paris. As I sipped coffee, I looked out the kitchen window at the garden Margaret loved so much. The autumn roses were still blooming, red and gold against the green leaves. She would have been happy to know I was finally doing this. The taxi arrived sharp at 7. The driver, a middle-aged Filipino man with a warm smile, helped me with my luggage. Airport, right? Business trip? No, I replied, feeling a smile spread across my face. Pleasure. Pure pleasure. As we walked out of my street, I took one last look at the house where I had lived for 30 years. The house where I had raised David, where I had cared for Margaret, where I had built a whole life. In 2 weeks he would be back. But he knew he wouldn't be the same man. At the airport, check-in went smoothly. The attendant, a young woman with curly hair, smiled when she saw my destination. Paris, how exciting, first time? First time, I confirmed. Lifelong dream. Well, you picked a perfect time. October in Paris is magical. Magical. The word echoed in my mind as I walked through the departure area. After 72 years, I was finally about to experience some magic. It was then that my phone rang. David. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, let it go to voicemail. But a smaller, more hopeful part wondered if maybe he was calling to apologize, to wish me a safe trip. Hello? Dad, where are you? There was no warmth in his voice, no remorse, just the same controlled anger of the last few days. At the airport. Dad, stop it, it's not too late. You can cancel the flight, come home, and we can talk about this rationally. Rationally, as if my dreams were irrational. David, my flight leaves in an hour, I'm going. Dad, you're making a terrible mistake. And when it all goes wrong, and it will, don't come crying to us. The threat was clear, do this and lose your family. David, he said calmly, if you can't support me right now, maybe it's best if we don't talk for a while. Okay. I hung up the phone. 15 minutes later it was ringing again. This time it was Emily. Grandpa, where are you? Are you at the airport yet? Yes, dear. Boarding in 40 minutes. I'm so excited for you. You're going to have the best adventure of your life. The difference between the two calls was stark, one filled with love and support, the other filled with fear and control. Emily, you are the only reason I still have faith in our family. Grandpa, you'll send me pictures, right? And call me when you get there? I promise. And Emily, thank you for everything, for believing in me when no one else did. Grandpa, you are the bravest person I know. Now go live your dreams. At 8:40, they called first class for boarding. I walked down the gangway feeling like a convict walking toward freedom. Each step took me further away from David and his attempts at control, and closer to Peter and the promises of youth. The first-class flight attendant, an elegant woman with a soft French accent, greeted me with a genuine smile. Bonjour, Monsieur Coleman. Welcome aboard. Is this your first trip to Paris? First time, I replied, still barely believing it was actually happening. Oh, how wonderful. You'll fall in love. Everyone falls in love with Paris. My seat was a soft leather chair by the window. As I stowed my carry-on, I felt a familiar weight in my jacket pocket. Margaret's letter, my anchor, my reminder of why I was doing this. The plane began to move, taxiing slowly down the runway. I looked out the window at Dayton Airport, receding into the distance, and felt a mix of emotions so intense it nearly brought tears to my eyes. Fear, of the unknown, of adventure, of the possibility that David was right and I was too old for this. Sadness, for the breakup with my son, for the family divided, for relationships that might never fully heal. But above all, a fierce and indomitable joy. Because after 72 years, 2 wars, an entire career, 45 years of marriage and 2 years of mourning, Richard Coleman was finally flying. The plane sped down the runway, and I felt the exact moment we left the ground. America was left behind. Dayton, David, Laura, social services, the law enforcement officers, everyone who tried to stop me, they were all left behind. Ahead lay Paris, Peter, adventure, the chance to prove there was still life in this old heart. The flight attendant approached with champagne. To celebrate your first trip to Paris, monsieur. I picked up the glass and played with it, whispering, to Margaret, to Peter, to the life I still have to live. The champagne was sweet and bubbly, like the promise of everything to come. 7 hours later, I was looking out the airplane window at a landscape that seemed straight out of a dream. France stretched out below like a mosaic of golden and green fields, small towns connected by roads that wound through the landscape like grey ribbons. It was more beautiful than any photograph had ever captured. "Mr. Coleman," the flight attendant approached with her warm smile, "we arrive in Paris in 15 minutes. How was the flight?" "Perfect," I replied, and it was true. I'd slept for a few hours, eaten a meal that was better than any dinner I'd had in years, and most importantly, I'd had time to think, to process what had happened in the last week, and what it meant to actually be here. During the flight, I had written in the notebook Emily had given me, not about the fight with David or the legal troubles that awaited me at home. I wrote about Margaret, about Peter, about the dreams I had carried for decades, about the feeling of finally at 72 doing something purely for my own happiness. Charles de Gaulle Airport was a chaotic universe of languages, cultures, and constant movement. But I didn't feel lost or confused as David had predicted. I felt alive. French immigration was polite but efficient. The officer, a young man with glasses and a thin moustache, stamped my passport with a "Bienvenue en France, monsieur," that made me smile like a child. I was in France. Really, officially in France. I grabbed my luggage and followed the signs to the exit, my heart pounding with every step. Peter had said he'd meet me in the arrivals hall, 50 years since we'd seen each other in person. Would I recognize him? Would he recognize me? And then I saw him. Completely white hair, but still thick. Gold-rimmed glasses. A smile that hadn't changed a bit. He held a makeshift sign that read, "Richard, my old friend," in large letters. "Peter! Richard!" We embraced there in the middle of the airport like two old fools, and I didn't care one bit that people were watching. This man had been my comrade in war, my bridge to sanity when all around us was chaos and death. I hadn't seen him in 50 years, but it was as if not a day had passed. "My God, Richard, you look exactly as I imagined you would. Distinguished, as the Americans say." Peter always mixed French and English when he was emotional. It was one of the things I missed most about our email conversations. "And you look exactly like a sophisticated Frenchman should," I replied, still holding his shoulders. "Peter, I can't believe I'm actually here. I knew you would come. When I got your email saying that that you were alone now, I knew it was finally time." He helped me with my luggage and guided me through the airport to where a small blue Citroën was parked. "I hope you don't mind small cars. In Paris, it's more practical. Peter, after 72 years, anything with wheels will do." On the way from the airport to the city, Peter told me about his life. He had been married 3 times. French women are complicated, mon ami. Had 2 children living in other cities, and had retired from engineering 5 years earlier. Now he spent his days painting bad watercolors and drinking coffee in small bistros. "And you, Richard, how are you dealing with the loss?" The question caught me off guard. Over email, it was easier to avoid the true depth of the pain. Some days are better than others. Margaret she was my anchor, you know. For 45 years, all my important decisions went through her. Now I'm learning to just be myself again. "What about your family? Did your son support this trip?" He laughed bitterly. "Let's just say David has very strong opinions about what men our age should and shouldn't do." Peter nodded understandingly. "Ah, yes, the children. They love us, but sometimes that love feels a lot like prison, doesn't it?" "Exactly." As we approached the center of Paris, the city began to reveal itself as a living work of art. Grey stone buildings with wrought iron balconies. Trees lined the avenues perfectly, sidewalk cafes where elegant people sipped coffee and smoked cigarettes, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Welcome to the city of light, mon ami." And it truly seemed bathed in light. The golden October light filtered through the autumn leaves, creating a magical glow that made everything look as if it had been painted by an impressionist master. Peter took me directly to the hotel I'd chosen, a small place called Hôtel des Grands Boulevards, in the historic center. It was exactly what I'd imagined a Parisian hotel should be. Elegant without being pretentious, historic without being old-fashioned. "You have the rest of the day to settle in and get over your jet lag," Peter said as he helped me check in. "Tomorrow we begin our real adventure. I have a list of places we absolutely have to visit." "Peter, can I ask you a question? Why didn't you remarry after the third time?" He smiled sadly. "Because I've learned that some people are made to share life and others are made to live their own adventures. I've discovered I'm the latter." In my room, a cozy space with windows overlooking a busy street, I finally had a moment to process where I was. Paris. Really in Paris. The dream I'd nurtured for decades was finally a reality. I called Emily as I promised. "Grandpa, you're here. How is Paris?" "Emily, it's indescribable. It's exactly how I imagined it, and completely different at the same time." "And Peter, did you recognize each other?" "Immediately. It's funny how some friendships transcend time." "Grandpa, I have to tell you, Dad is furious. He found out about the bank transfers. He's talking about suing Robert Chen." I sighed. Even thousands of miles away, David was still trying to control my life. "Emily, let him sue whoever he wants. I'm in Paris, living a dream. He's in Dayton, consumed by rage. Who do you think is doing it better?" "Definitely you, Grandpa. Definitely you." That night, I dined alone at a small bistro near the hotel. Coq au vin, small potatoes sautéed in butter, and a bottle of Bordeaux that cost more than I spent on food in an entire week at home. But every penny was worth it. Not for the food, though it was exceptional, but for the feeling of finally living, of doing something purely for pleasure, purely for myself. As I walked back to the hotel through the brightly lit streets of Paris, I passed young couples kissing on bridges, artists painting portraits on Place du Tertre, and musicians playing smooth jazz on dark street corners. This was the Paris I had dreamed of. The Paris Margaret and I had planned to see together, and although she wasn't with me physically, I felt her presence in every step, her approval in every moment of joy. David had tried to steal that from me. He had tried to convince me that I was too old, too weak, too irresponsible to be here. But as I walked the streets where Hemingway walked, where Picasso painted, where generations of dreamers came to seek inspiration and adventure, I knew with absolute certainty some dreams are worth any price, and my revenge against those who tried to stop me would be to simply live these dreams with every fiber of my being. On my second day in Paris, Peter took me on a journey through time. I woke at 7 in the morning, completely adjusted to local time and more energized than I'd felt in years. Outside, Paris was awakening to the soft hum of cafes opening, people walking to work, and the unmistakable aroma of fresh croissants wafting through the air. Peter met me in the lobby at 9, dressed like a true Parisian. Navy blue blazer, wool scarf, and that expression of someone who knows all the city's secrets. "Bonjour, mon ami. Ready for your first true Parisian experience?" "More ready than I've ever been for anything in my life." Our first destination was a small café Peter had frequented for 20 years, Les Deux Magots, in the heart of Saint-Germain-des-Prés. According to Peter, the place where Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir used to sit and write and philosophize. "Here," Peter said, guiding me to a table by the window, "is where you learn the French art of doing nothing productive and feeling completely fulfilled." We ordered coffee, strong espresso that arrived in delicate porcelain cups, and croissants that melted in your mouth like browned butter. For a solid hour, we simply sat there, watching Paris wake up. "Richard," Peter said eventually, "tell me about your war with your son." I laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "That's right, a war. He thinks I'm a senile old man who needs to be protected from my own decisions. And what do you think? I think he's scared." "Of what?" I thought for a moment, watching a young couple kissing across the street. "That I'll prove him wrong. That there's still life in this old body. That maybe his own conservative, safe choices aren't the only right ones." Peter nodded slowly. "You know, Richard, My children did the same thing when I started painting. They said it was inappropriate for my age to behave like a bohemian artist. They wanted me to buy a small apartment, adopt a cat, and patiently wait for death. And what did you do? I bought more paint. I painted worse pictures, and I was happier than I had been in decades. After coffee, Peter took me for a walk through the Latin Quarter, medieval cobblestone streets intertwined like a romantic maze, old bookstores where you could get lost for hours, small art galleries where unknown artists displayed works that would make you stop and question everything you thought you knew about beauty. Peter, why have you never visited the United States? In 50 years, we've always talked about you coming to see me, but it never happened. He stopped walking and leaned against an iron fence that protected a small square. Honestly, because I was afraid that America would change you, or that I would discover that you had changed on your own. I preferred to keep the memory of the brave young soldier I knew in the war. What now? Have I changed a lot? Peter studied me with those intelligent blue eyes that reminded me so much of our younger days. You have changed, yes, but not in the ways I feared. You have become wiser, stronger, and more determined. The Richard I knew in the war ran from German tanks. This Richard faces authoritarian children and bureaucratic systems. Both require the same kind of courage. That comparison resonated deeply with me. I had never thought of my struggle with David in those terms, as a battle that required real courage. Our next stop was the Louvre. Not the full tourist tour, that would take days, but a carefully curated pilgrimage to the treasures Peter considered essential. We stood there for 20 minutes in front of the Mona Lisa, not because we had to, but because there was something mesmerizing about that enigmatic smile. It was as if she knew something we didn't, some secret about the nature of happiness. Peter, do you think she looked satisfied? Not satisfied, Richard. Complete. There's a difference. After the Louvre, Peter insisted we go to the Eiffel Tower. It's cliché, he admitted, but you're only a tourist once in your life. We went up to the second floor. The elevator was packed with people speaking 10 different languages, and from there we looked out over Paris, stretching out in all directions like an architectural dream. Margaret would have loved that, he said quietly. Tell me about her, about how you met. Church dance, 1955. She was wearing a blue dress that matched her eyes exactly. I was a soldier just back from war, arrogant and thinking I knew everything about life. I smiled at the memory. She taught me that I knew nothing. Like this? I thought courage was not being afraid. She showed me that courage is being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. I thought love was possession. She taught me that love is shared freedom. Peter was silent for a long moment. And that's why you're here. Because she taught you that loving someone means supporting their dreams, not controlling them. Exactly. David never understood that. Maybe he'll understand one day, when he's older, when he has to choose between safety and adventure for himself. That afternoon, Peter took me to what he called a special program, a small wine shop in Montmartre, where the owner, a short Frenchman with a flamboyant moustache, served us wines he'd been storing for decades. Monsieur Peter tells me you're old friends from the war, the owner said in heavily accented English. For brave soldiers I have special wines. He brought out a dust-covered bottle that he said was from 1945, the year the war ended. The wine was as smooth as velvet and as complex as history itself. Richard, Peter raised his glass. Cheers. To what? To the second chance, to the proof that it's never too late to be who you've always been inside. We toasted, and the wine tasted like victory. As we headed back to the hotel at the end of the day, my phone rang. It was Emily. Grandpa, how was your second day? Indescribable, my dear. Peter showed me a Paris I could never have discovered on my own. And how are you two getting along, after so long? It's as if we had never been apart. There are certain friendships that time cannot touch. Grandpa, I have news from home. Dad went to your bank today. He tried to access your accounts. My joy momentarily turned to anger. And you succeeded. No. The manager said all accounts were protected and that he would need specific legal documentation. Dad was furious. Emily, did he say anything about when I get back? He said you will pay the consequences of your irresponsible decisions. Grandpa, I'm starting to get scared of what he might do. I glanced at Peter, who was watching a street music performance on the corner. An accordionist played a melancholy waltz while couples danced beneath the yellow streetlights. Emily, don't worry about me. I have a lifetime of experience dealing with difficult people. And now I have something David can't touch. 2 weeks of perfect memories in Paris. You're really happy, aren't you, Grandpa? I looked around, at the lit streets, at Peter smiling as he watched the dancers, at the entire city pulsing with life and possibility, and knew the answer was simple. Emily, for the first time since your grandmother died, I am completely, deeply happy. And it was true. David could try to punish me when I returned. He could sue my lawyer, freeze my accounts, even try to commit me to hospital. But he could never steal these moments from me. This was my revenge, to be happy despite all his efforts to make me unhappy. My last day in Paris dawned with a gentle rain that made the city seem even more romantic, if that were possible. 2 weeks had passed like a golden dream. Peter and I explored every corner of Paris we could reach. We visited Versailles, sailed the Seine, and spent entire afternoons in small museums that tourists never discover. We drank wine in underground cellars that had existed since the Middle Ages. We ate in restaurants where the waiters treated us like family. But more important than all of this, I had rediscovered myself. The man who had spent 2 years grieving, who had allowed his son to make him feel worthless and incapable, was gone. In his place was someone I hadn't seen in decades, Richard Coleman, 22, full of curiosity and courage. You look different, Peter said during our last coffee at Les Deux Magots. Lighter, like you've left a heavy weight somewhere. I really did. I let go of the guilt of being happy after Margaret died. I let go of the obligation to live up to other people's expectations. I let go of the fear of disappointing people who were already disappointed in me anyway. Peter smiled. And what are you going to do when you get home? It was the question I had been avoiding thinking about for 2 weeks. Face the consequences, I suppose. David will probably have a list of punishments prepared. Lawsuits, bank freezes, maybe even another attempt to have me declared incompetent. And you are afraid? I pondered the question as I watched an elderly Frenchman feeding pigeons in the square. He must have been 80, but there was something youthful in his movements, as if each crumb of bread were a small gift to the world. No, I replied, surprised by my own certainty. I'm not afraid, because no matter what David does, he can't undo these 2 weeks. He can't erase the memories. He can't steal the proof that I'm still capable of adventure. What if he actually gets you committed? What if he uses the legal system against you? Then I will fight. And if I lose, at least I will lose knowing that I lived fully until the last possible moment. Peter reached across the table and shook mine. Richard, you've become exactly the man I hoped you would become. Margaret would be proud. At Charles de Gaulle Airport, our goodbye was harder than I had anticipated. 50 years of separation had healed in 2 perfect weeks, and now we faced the possibility that we would never see each other again. Peter, thank you for everything. For showing me Paris, for reminding me who I am, for— My voice trailed off. For giving me back my best friend, he finished. Richard, promise me one thing. Anything. Don't let them steal this from you. Don't let them turn this adventure into something you regret. You did the right thing. I promise. And next time I'll visit you in Ohio. I want to meet this Emily who loves you so much. And I want to take a look at this David and see if I can make him understand the mistake he's making. The return flight was a completely different experience from the outbound flight. There was no anxiety or nervousness, just a sense of completeness, as if I had closed a circle that had been open for decades. I wrote in the notebook Emily had given me, documenting every perfect moment of the 2 weeks. The mental snapshots I wanted to preserve forever. The taste of French press coffee. The sound of the accordion echoing through the cobblestone streets. The feeling of being alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. When the plane landed in Dayton, it was Sunday afternoon. The same day of the week David and Laura used to come over for dinner, a tradition I suspected was about to end for good. Emily was waiting for me at the airport, beaming with joy. "Grandpa, wow, you look 10 years younger." "I feel 20 years younger, darling." She hugged me tightly, and in that hug I felt all the love and support that had sustained me through the most difficult times before the trip. "Tell me everything. I want to know every detail." On the way home, I recounted some of the adventures, but kept the most profound ones to myself. Some experiences are too sacred to share, even with those we love. "And how are things here? Is your father still furious?" Emily hesitated. "Grandpa, there are some things I need to tell you." "Dad, he did some things while you were gone." My stomach tightened, but my voice remained calm. "What kind of things?" "He tried to break into your house, twice. He said he was checking to make sure everything was okay, but Mrs. Martinez from next door called me and said he seemed to be looking for something. And he hired a private investigator to document his erratic behavior, as he called it. The guy followed him around Paris, took pictures of him in cafes, at the Louvre, even hugging Peter at the airport. The invasion of privacy shocked me, but didn't surprise me. David was determined to prove me incompetent, even if it meant spying on me internationally. "Is there more?" "He's scheduled a hearing with a judge for when you return. He wants to present evidence that you're suffering from senile dementia and are a danger to yourself." We arrived at my home, the home I had left 2 weeks before as a defeated man, and to which I returned as one who had regained his strength. "Emily, can you do me a favor?" "Sure, Grandpa." "Call Robert Chen. Tell him I'm here, that I'm okay, and that we'll need to prepare for battle." "Aren't you scared?" I looked at my house, at Margaret's garden, at the life I'd built for 7 decades. Then I thought of Paris, of Peter, of the 2 weeks that had proved to me I was still capable of anything. "Emily, 2 weeks ago, I was a broken man intimidated by bureaucracy and controlling children. Today, I am a man who drank 1945 wine in Montmartre, who walked the same streets as Hemingway, who proved to himself that adventure has no age." I grabbed my luggage and walked towards the front door. David can bring his investigators, his psychiatrists, his lawyers, and his judges. He can try to steal my home, my money, even my freedom. But there is one thing he will never be able to do. "What, Grandpa?" "He will never be able to steal from me the proof that Richard Coleman is still alive, that he is still capable of dreaming, of adventure, of being happy." I opened the door to my house and breathed in the familiar scent. Home. But now it was different. It was no longer a prison where I passively awaited death. It was a base of operations for whatever adventure I decided to undertake next. Because David had given me the greatest gift possible, even without knowing it. He had forced me to prove my own strength. And now that I knew what I was capable of, nothing, absolutely nothing, could stop me again. My revenge was complete. Not through the destruction of my opponents, but through my own resurrection. I had won not just the battle, but the war for my own soul, and Paris would just be the beginning. 6 months later, I received a letter that would change everything once again. It was from a law firm in Paris. Peter had died peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks after I left, and he had left me something in his will, his small house in Provence, with one condition. The condition was that I use it to live the life Margaret and he had always known I deserved. David contested the will, of course he did, but this time I wasn't fighting alone. "Emily, now 19 and studying law, had become my partner in the legal battle. Robert Chen had become more than my lawyer. He was my friend. And there was something more. There were other people my age who had read about my story in the local newspapers. Seniors who were facing the same attempts at control from well-meaning but misguided children. Together, we formed a small group that began meeting weekly to share stories and strategies. We weren't victims, we were survivors. At the final hearing, the judge, a woman in her 60s with intelligent eyes, listened to all of David's arguments. The Paris photos, the private investigators' reports, the allegations of erratic behavior. Then she asked me to speak. "Your Excellency," I said, rising to my feet with the dignity I had regained on the streets of Paris, "my son believes that love means control. I have learned that love means freedom. He wants to protect me from life. I want to live the life I have left with courage and joy. What about the house in France, your plans? I plan to spend half the year there, traveling around Europe, writing about my adventures and proving that retirement is not a death sentence. It's an opportunity for a second youth." The judge's decision was unanimous. I would remain in full control of my faculties and finances. David was required to pay the legal costs, and the house in Provence officially became mine. Today, as I write this story from a balcony overlooking lavender fields stretching to the horizon, I can say with certainty, life truly begins when you decide to stop asking permission to live it. David and I eventually reconciled. It took time, family therapy, and a very frank conversation about the difference between love and possessiveness. He still cares about me, but he's learned to channel that concern into support rather than control. Laura. Well, Laura still thinks I'm a stubborn old man, but now she says it with something that sounds like admiration. And Emily. Emily spent her summer vacation with me in France, learning that courage is hereditary and that dreams have no expiration date. Richard Coleman's story forces us to question deep truths about family, control, and freedom. How often do we confuse genuine love with possessiveness? How often do we allow fear of others or our own to prevent us from living fully? Richard proved that age is just a number when it comes to courage, and that true betrayal lies not in following our dreams, but in abandoning them due to external pressure. His journey from Dayton to Paris was more than a trip. It was a declaration of emotional independence that resonates with anyone who has ever felt their autonomy questioned by those who should support it. In a world that often treats the elderly as frail and incapable, Richard chose the sweetest revenge possible, simply being happy. He reminds us that as long as there's life, there's the possibility of adventure, growth, and personal fulfillment. What dreams are you putting off? What personal Paris awaits your courage to explore? Richard's life teaches us that it's never too late to reclaim our own story, to choose freedom over security, and to prove that true love doesn't control, it liberates. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more inspiring stories. Share in the comments. What dream are you holding on to, and when do you plan to achieve it?